Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The lock clicked shut, a sound like a gunshot in the cavernous silence of the penthouse, and I didn't look back at the millions of dollars in art, the silk sheets, or the man who thought he owned my soul. I stepped into the elevator, my knuckles white around the plastic handle of a cheap umbrella, the only barrier between me and the deluge waiting below. In my other arm, pressed tight against my thumping heart, was Nimbus, a white cat who hissed softly at the descending sensation. I had no money. I had no plan. I had blocked the number of the most dangerous man in the city, a man who could dismantle corporations with a whisper and break bones with a smile. It was suicide. It was madness. But as the elevator doors chimed and opened to the gray, weeping lobby, I tasted the first sharp, metallic tang of freedom. 3 years later, the bell above the door of the paper garden chimed, signaling a customer, but the storm outside was so violent it nearly drowned out the sound. Julian looked up from the bookbinding station, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. The shop was small, smelling of old glue, dried lavender, and rain. It was a far cry from the glass-walled prison in the sky where he used to live, high above the smog of the city. Here, the floorboards creaked, and the heating rattled, but it was his. "We're closing in 5 minutes," Julian called out, his voice soft, distracted by the delicate task of threading a needle through a leather spine. There was no answer. A cold draft swept through the shop, chilling the sweat on Julian's neck. The hair on his arms stood up, not from the cold, but from an instinct buried deep in his lizard brain. A primal warning. He knew that silence. He knew the weight of that specific presence. Nimbus, curled on the counter, woke instantly. The white cat, usually docile and lazy, arched his back and let out a low, guttural growl, his blue eyes fixed on the figure standing in the entryway. Julian froze. His fingers trembled, just once, before he forced them to still. He slowly set the needle down and looked up. Standing there, dripping wet in a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than Julian's entire shop, was Cassian Vane. He hadn't aged. If anything, time had sharpened him. His jaw was a razor of tension, his raven hair slicked back from a forehead that bore the subtle lines of chronic insomnia. His eyes, dark as obsidian and twice as hard, were locked on Julian with a hunger that made the air in the room feel thin. "You're hard to find," Cassian said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth like aged whiskey, but it carried an undercurrent of exhaustion. Julian stood his ground behind the counter, though his knees felt like water. "I didn't want to be found." "I know." Cassian stepped further into the shop. He didn't look at the books. He didn't look at the cat. He saw only Julian. I respected that. For a time. 3 years is a long time for a man who usually gets what he wants in 3 minutes, Julian retorted, surprised by the bite in his own tone. The old Julian, the one who had been a glorified accessory to the Vane Empire, would never have spoken back. Cassian's lips quirked, a ghost of a smile, devoid of humor. "I thought you would come back. I thought you would realize you couldn't survive without the lifestyle." "Without me, I survived just fine." "Did you?" Cassian glanced around the cramped shop, his gaze critical. "You sell used books and bind journals for pennies. You live in a walk-up with faulty plumbing. You wear sweaters with frayed cuffs. I wear them because I like them." Julian snapped, stepping around the counter, placing himself protectively between Cassian and the cat. "Why are you here, Cassian? If you've come to drag me back, you should know I have a phone under this counter, and I will call the police. I don't care who you own in the precinct." Cassian took another step, closing the distance. The scent of him, ozone, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of rain, washed over Julian, triggering a dizzying wave of memories. Nights spent in tangled sheets, the feeling of Cassian's large hand on his throat, the possessive whispers, the suffocating isolation. "I'm not here to drag you back," Cassian said quietly. He reached into his jacket pocket. Julian flinched. Cassian froze, his eyes narrowing as he saw the fear in Julian's reaction. A flicker of genuine pain crossed the tycoon's face, there and gone in an instant. He slowly withdrew a hand, empty save for a folded envelope. He placed it on a table of bestsellers. "I'm here because you are in danger, Julian." Julian laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. The only danger I've ever been in was loving you. The Sokolov Syndicate is moving into the city, Kashin said, ignoring the barb, though his jaw tightened. They are dismantling my operations. They are looking for weaknesses. Leverage. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. I haven't been your weakness in 3 years. Everyone knows we're done. Everyone knows you were the only thing I ever kept, Kashin corrected, his voice dropping to a rumble. To them, you aren't an ex-lover. You are a loose end. A way to make me bleed. So what? You're here to use me as bait. I'm here to take you to a safe house. Until I handle it. And if I refuse? Kashin looked at him, and for the first time, Julian saw the cracks in the armor. The desperation. Then they will kill you. And if you die, Julian, I will burn this entire city to the ground until there is nothing left but ash. The intensity of the statement hung heavy in the damp air. Nimbus hissed again, sensing the volatility of the man before them. I'm not going with you, Julian whispered, though his resolve was fracturing under the weight of Kashin's terrified gaze. Please, Kashin said. The words shattered the atmosphere. Kashin Vane did not say please. He commanded. He acquired. He conquered. He never begged. 1 week, Kashin bargained, stepping closer, his hand hovering near Julian's arm but not touching, as if afraid Julian would shatter. Give me 1 week to clear the board. Then I will let you go. I will never darken your doorstep again. You have my word. Julian looked at the man he had once loved with every fiber of his being, and the man he had hated enough to leave in a storm. He looked at the rain lashing against the window, the darkness of the street outside. I take the cat, Julian said. Kashin let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since he walked in. The cat comes. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a brutalist mansion, hidden deep in the forested hills outside the city. It was cold, concrete, and echoed with the same emptiness that had filled their old penthouse. For 3 days, they existed in a strange, suspended orbit. Kashin spent his time in the study, shouting into phones, ordering hits, moving assets. Julian stayed in the library, reading books he couldn't focus on, with Nimbus acting as a white, fluffy sentinel at his feet. They ate dinner in silence at a table long enough to seat 20. On the 4th night, the silence broke. Julian found Kashin on the balcony, staring out at the dark tree line. He was smoking, a habit he had quit years ago because Julian hated the smell. You're smoking again, Julian said, stepping into the cold night air. Kashin didn't turn. Old habits. You have a lot of those. Kashin crushed the cigarette out on the stone railing. Why did you leave, Julian? The question was soft, carried away by the wind. You know why. I gave you everything. Kashin turned then, his eyes burning. I gave you a life people dream of. You never had to work. You never had to worry. You were safe. I was a pet, Julian shot back, the anger finally bubbling over. I was a bird in a gilded cage, Kashin. You didn't want a partner, you wanted a possession. You cut me off from my friends because they were bad influences. You made me quit my job because it wasted my time. You decided what I wore, where we ate, who I spoke to. I was protecting you. Kashin roared, the facade of calm cracking. The world is a viper's nest, Julian. You are soft. You trust too easily. I built walls to keep the monsters out. You became the monster. Julian yelled back, tears stinging his eyes. You didn't protect me from the world. You protected the world from touching your property. I left because I was forgetting who I was. I looked in the mirror, and I saw nothing but your reflection. Kashin stared at him, his chest heaving. The moonlight cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look skeletal, haunted. I didn't know how else to love you, Kashin whispered, his voice cracking. I have never loved anything that wasn't taken from me. I thought, if I held on tight enough, if I controlled every variable, you couldn't leave. You couldn't die. And in doing so, you killed us, Julian said, his voice trembling. He turned to leave, unable to bear the raw agony in Kashin's eyes. Julian. He stopped. I went to the flower shop every day. Kashin confessed to Julian's back. For 3 years. I sat in my car across the street. I watched you unlock the door. I watched you arrange the peonies. I saw you smile at strangers in a way you stopped smiling at me. I wanted to storm in there and drag you home 1,000 times. Why didn't you? Because you looked happy, Kashin said, the words sounding like they were ripped from his throat. And that terrified me more than losing you. Realizing that your happiness required my absence. Julian felt a tear roll down his cheek. He didn't turn around. He walked back inside, leaving Cashin alone in the dark. The attack happened the next morning. It wasn't cinematic. It was chaotic and loud. The sound of glass shattering woke Julian. Then the gunfire. He scrambled out of bed, grabbing Nimbus, who was hissing violently. The heavy oak door of his bedroom burst open before he could reach it. Cashin was there. He was bleeding from a cut above his brow, his white shirt stained with crimson, a gun in his hand. They found us, Cashin said, his voice eerily calm. Get to the panic room. Basement level. Go. Cashin, go. Cashin shoved him toward the hallway. Julian ran. He could hear shouting downstairs, the thud of heavy boots. He clutched Nimbus so tight the cat yowled. He reached the heavy steel door of the panic room disguised as a wine cellar rack, punching in the code Cashin had forced him to memorize. The door hissed open. Julian stepped inside, but he stopped. He looked back. Cashin wasn't following. He was standing at the top of the stairs, reloading his magazine, positioning himself as a human shield between the attackers and the basement. Cashin, get in here. Julian screamed. There are too many. Cashin yelled back, not looking at him. If I come in, they'll just drill the door until it breaches. I have to buy you time. Police are 3 minutes out. No. You'll die. Cashin turned his head. His eyes were wild, blood trickling down his temple, but he smiled. It was the first genuine smile Julian had seen on him in years. Then I die, Cashin said. Go inside, Julian. Close the door. Cashin. A spray of bullets chewed up the drywall next to Cashin. He flinched, but didn't retreat. He raised his weapon and fired back. I love you, Cashin roared over the gunfire. Now close the goddamn door. Julian sobbed, his hand hovering over the panel. Nimbus jumped from his arms, spooked by the noise, and darted, not into the room, but out into the hallway, towards the chaos. Nimbus! Julian shrieked. The white cat froze in the middle of the hallway, confused by the noise. A mercenary appeared at the top of the stairs, raising a rifle. He saw the movement of the white animal and swung the barrel. It happened in slow motion. Cashin saw the gun turn toward the cat that Julian loved more than anything. The symbol of Julian's freedom. Cashin didn't think. He threw himself away from cover, diving across the open hallway. He scooped the cat up in one fluid motion, shielding the small white body with his own massive frame. The rifle cracked. Cashin jerked violently midair. He hit the ground hard, sliding across the polished wood, curling around the cat. No! Julian's scream tore his throat raw. He didn't close the panic room door. He ran. He ran into the gunfire, heedless of the danger. He fell to his knees beside Cashin. The mercenary raised his rifle again to finish them both. A shot rang out. The mercenary's head snapped back, and he crumpled. Julian looked up to see Cashin's head of security, accompanied by a SWAT team, swarming the entryway. The cavalry had arrived. But Julian didn't care. He looked down. Cashin was pale, gasping for air. Blood was pooling dark and fast beneath him. Nimbus, miraculously unharmed, was squirming out of Cashin's grip, meowing loudly, batting at Cashin's chin with a soft paw. You idiot, Julian sobbed, pressing his hands against the wound in Cashin's chest. You absolute idiot. For a cat? You took a bullet for a cat. Cashin's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, losing focus. He looked at the white cat, then up at Julian. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Not. For the cat. Cashin wheezed, his hand coming up to weakly cover Julian's hand on his chest. For you. Don't want you. To be alone. In the rain. Again. Stay with me. Julian begged, the tears blinding him. Don't you dare leave me, Cashin vain. That is an order. You like giving orders? Take one. Stay. Cashin's eyes drifted shut, his hand going slack. Cashin. The beep of the heart monitor was the most annoying sound in the world, and yet, to Julian, it was a symphony. It had been 2 weeks. Julian sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, a book lying unread in his lap. Nimbus was asleep at the foot of the bed, a violation of hospital policy that Julian had threatened 3 nurses to overlook. Cashin stirred. Julian was on his feet instantly. Cashin blinked, his eyes adjusting to the sterile light. He looked at Julian, then at the cat on his feet. He let out a groan that was half pain, half annoyance. I'm alive, he rasped. Unfortunately for the devil, yes, Julian said, though his voice was thick with emotion. He poured a cup of water and held the straw to Cashin's lips. Cashin drank greedily. When he finished, he looked at Julian. The syndicate? Gone. Dismantled. Your head of security enjoyed the purge. Cashin nodded slowly. And you? I'm here. You should go, Cashin said, looking at the ceiling. The danger is over. You have your life back. I gave up my apartment, Julian said casually. Cashin froze. What? It had bad plumbing. And the landlord was a jerk. Julian sat back down. I'm thinking of moving. Maybe something with a garden. Nimbus likes the grass. Cashin turned his head, wincing. Julian, don't play games with me. I'm not. Julian took Cashin's hand. It was weak, calloused, and familiar. You took a bullet for my cat, Cashin. That doesn't erase the past. It doesn't undo the years I felt like a prisoner. But it proved that you can learn, Julian said softly. You put something I loved above your own life. That's not possession. That's sacrifice. Cashin squeezed his hand, his grip faint but desperate. I will not cage you again. I swear it. I know, Julian said, his eyes flashing with a newfound steel. Because I won't let you. The moment you try to control me, I'm gone. And this time, I won't just take an umbrella. I'll take half your assets. Cashin stared at him for a long moment, stunned. Then, a genuine laugh bubbled up from his chest, turning into a pained cough. You'd do it too. Try me. Cashin looked at Julian, really looked at him. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw a survivor. An equal. Someone who could stand in the rain and not drown. A garden, Cashin mused, closing his eyes, a peaceful expression settling over his sharp features. I can buy you a garden. Julian corrected. We can buy a garden. I sell a lot of books, you know. Deal. Outside the hospital window, the clouds broke. The rain had stopped. And that is how the florist tamed the Titan. If you enjoyed seeing Cashin finally learn his lesson, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, can a toxic relationship ever truly become healthy, or was Julian foolish to stay? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.